It was a spacious four-bedroom house with a huge deck and a hot tub overlooking the Colorado countryside. Since it was already nighttime by the time we got there, we went out to a local bar on the first night, which was a Thursday. The next day, we went straight to the mountain via Uber. We got our rental equipment at the mountain to make things easier. It actually wasn't super crowded on the first day, probably because it was a work day. The next day, it got a lot more crowded. For some reason, I just couldn't really get the hang of it. I couldn't make it down a slope without falling at least a few times. At a certain point, I was so fed up that I just sat on the side of a slope to catch my breath and take a break. Meanwhile, a bunch of people zoomed past me, even little kids that made it look easy. And then came this man, who seemed like he didn't really know what he was doing either. He came up to me and asked if I was okay, and he started trying to make conversation with me. It was the weirdest spot to make conversation, so after a few seconds of answering his questions, I got up and said, "Nice talking to you," and resumed trying to snowboard down the mountain. This mountain was a blue run, meaning it was a longer slope to get down and slightly more difficult than a green. I stopped again a little further down the mountain to take another break. I really wasn't having fun. To my dismay, I saw that guy from before approaching me again. He was inching closer to me with the same struggle I had been dealing with. He stopped right next to me and unstrapped from his snowboard, then sat a few feet from me. He started talking to me about how he's not used to so many pretty girls like me being here. This was super weird because I had on a ski mask and helmet. My face was practically covered. He asked who I was here with. I lied and said my boyfriend. He laughed and said he saw me come here with all girls. I looked at him and said, "You," really loud, and then got back on my snowboard and continued down the mountain. It's weird, but I snowboarded better than I ever had in that moment, perhaps because I had the proper motivation to just get down the mountain. When I got to the bottom, I immediately went to the lodge and sat at one of the tables, calling each of my friends. Amy was the first one to pick up. I explained what just happened and asked her to come sit with me. A few minutes later, I saw her walking over to me. I'd already texted our group chat saying we should leave. It was already around 3 o'clock anyway. We'd been there a few hours. When Angel and Jessica finished whatever run they were on, they met us back at the lodge. We returned our rental gear and then Ubered back to the Airbnb. We all showered and changed, then headed out to the village for dinner. We went out to a few of the local bars afterward and got decently drunk. When we came back to the Airbnb, we all four went into the hot tub on the deck and drank more alcohol. After a while, we all eventually went to our rooms to sleep. I'm basically an insomniac, and I stayed up on my phone for over an hour, scrolling on TikTok. Even as I was still buzzed, I wasn't tired, and this was a very, very good thing that may have saved us. I heard footsteps out in the common area, either the living room or the kitchen. Initially, I thought it was one of the girls going to the bathroom or getting water, but then I heard the doorknob to my door twisting. I sat up and was about to say one of their names, but I stopped myself because why would one of them be trying to come into my room? I instantly went to the group chat to text everyone and ask who that was. Nobody answered. They must have been asleep. I tiptoed to the door and put my ear up against it. I heard footsteps moving around. When it went quiet, I ever so quietly unlocked the door and twisted the doorknob. I pushed the door open as gently as I could and peeked into the living room. I looked from corner to corner until I saw a tall black silhouette walking from one door to another. It was a man for sure. He was trying to get into one of our rooms. I wanted to scream out to my friends to warn them, but I stayed silent because I was too scared. I closed my door quietly and locked it. I prayed to God everyone had their doors locked. 4 girls in one Airbnb though, of course we did. I called 911 quietly and whispered the entire time into the phone. That's when I heard light knocks on my bedroom door. I turned to the door and watched as the doorknob started to turn, but he couldn't open it. I kept saying, "Please hurry," into the phone. All the woman on the line kept saying back was, "They're almost here," and to remain quiet. It was entirely possible that the man on the other side of the door heard me whispering because he started pushing into the door. I heard shoves and bangs on the door and I just couldn't help it anymore. I screamed, "Get out of here," followed with, "I'm on the phone with 911 right now." The bangs stopped and a voice on the other side said, "Okay, sweetheart," and then I heard his footsteps walking away. The 911 operator instructed me to stay in the room until police arrived. I peeked outside the window, but it was simply too dark to see anything beyond a few feet in front of the window. My friends were awake now from my screams. I told them all to stay in their rooms. Police police finally got there about 5 to 10 minutes later, and they came right into the Airbnb since the door was unlocked. Once it was confirmed the intruder was gone, we ensured every entry point was locked and secured. They left, and sleeping after that was difficult, of course. The idea came up that it was that creepy man from the mountain who was following me, and I do believe that's a possibility. The voice could have been a match. Honestly, after working out a partial refund with the Airbnb host, we spent Sunday traveling the area instead of snowboarding again, and we stayed at a small motel Sunday night. We flew home